And it is an early draft, but just to give you a quick idea of the process, it's been quite a bit of a process over the last 6 or 8 months. And that's included obviously a bunch of conversations with stakeholders, but it's also included having a biosecurity working party composed of 3 councillors and 3 Maori representatives, providing us feedback across that time as well on the 8 or so key issues that were agreed probably around about 9 to 12 months ago by the Environment Services Committee. So today's really an opportunity, and I don't propose to go through the agenda item in detail, and I don't propose to go through the 85 pages of the draft proposal in detail either, but it's an opportunity for anyone to raise questions or queries around the items which are in the agenda and or the draft proposal itself, including the 8 issues which we have identified, the timeline and the regional pest management proposal. The one thing I would note with the proposal is there's a couple of key outstanding items yet to be finalised on it. They're basically 90% done. One of those is around the cost-benefit analysis, and one of them is around the Section 70 analysis, which is effectively just making sure that you've done the process right. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Campbell. One of the things I was intrigued in is you've got lists of obviously pests and pest plants and so on and so on. How does for example, a pest plant get included or added to the list in time or in the future?
So there's a range of ways a pest plant or any pest can be added into a regional pest management plan. It can be through staff identifying an issue. It can be through members of the community identifying that there's a reason to include it. It could be through a national initiative. It could be someone like MPI or another national organisation like DOC has identified it as a risk. And once it passes the tests required under the Biosecurity Act, then it can come through the process we're going through now.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Campbell, I'm not particularly happy with this because I don't think it goes anywhere near as far as it needs to go to help us to adopt it and understand what we're adopting and understand how you're going to report against it. So what this has got is a whole lot of descriptions of pests, some of which we're targeting and some of which we're not. It doesn't particularly deal with the level of infestation we've got. So for instance with, I don't know, Chilean needleweed for instance, why wouldn't it say what the extent of spread is in Hawke's Bay as an example of what we should be looking at? Then it should go on and say what is the plan, why are we going to eradicate it or control it or whatever we're going to do, what is the plan for control or elimination, what are the measurable milestones against which we can be judged, because that's how this all works. We get money from the community to do things, you do things for us, and we're all accountable. And I don't see any milestones here. I don't see enough information to give us confidence about what you're planning to do, how you're planning to do it, or how we can measure the level of our success. And that's what I would have expected to see in this document.
So just, and that's a fair question around the overall process that you'd need to have a robust process. So just to be clear, the regional pest management proposal and those things which are in here under the 8 issues are largely existing pest challenges. So there is already, so there's the regional pest management plan itself, and then alongside that, with exactly the sort of thing you're talking about, there's an operational plan. And the operational plan sets out what's going to be done, how it's going to be done, what the outcomes you're expecting to get, and how you propose to measure it. And so for these pests which are in here, largely which are already in our regional pest plan, there is an existing operational plan. Normally that would come to you towards the end of November or before the end of November to comment on the last year's results.
Yep.
And you get the chance to comment on the next year's operational plan in May each year.
Okay, so what I'd like to see, because this is going to come back to council presumably, what I'd like to see is the two hand in hand, so we can actually, it still seems a bit messy to me to have to cross-reference a whole lot of stuff, but that's what I'd like to see, because this by itself is a little bit meaningless in my mind.
If I could interpose one thought on that. The council did appoint Councillor Graham, Councillor Wilson and myself as was noted, with 3 Maori members to develop this proposal, and through a series of meetings, I mean, we did go through each of these in quite a bit of detail. You know, we had a yarn about feral goats and privet and et cetera, and we went through them painstakingly one by one. So I guess I would have to, I'm the only one of those 3 councillors sitting here at the moment.
That's your fault.
It's our fault. But no, I mean, I guess my feeling is that you delegated to us to try to swallow all of this activity and bring back something that we thought was appropriately targeted and justifiable and so forth. And from my standpoint, I'm happy to recommend that that's what I think we did. So it is indeed missing a lot of other material that we got exposed to over time. But
So the question is, to answer Councillor Bevan's question, you are able to provide the information to him so he can read it all and satisfy himself that it has objectives, structures, processes, measures, etc., and that he has the full picture.
you take any one of these privet, and there was quite a fulsome discussion as to whether it should be done on a health basis, a nuisance basis, was it an issue at all, et cetera, and so, yeah, the background is there.
Can they be forwarded to Councillor Bevan?
No, what I'd like, what I'd like is to see this hand in hand with that. Because the documents are they're interrelated, aren't they? And they've got to sit with each other before you can make sense of them.
They need to sit together in terms of the overall process.
Yeah.
So obviously that's the case. So what would be relatively straightforward to do is to set for each of these issues a paragraph which really summarises the significant context which has been put already to the working group. And at the same time, for anyone who wants to, I'm happy to pre-circulate the operational plan so that you can see that context. If you want to give me direction that you want to see it all together at the next council meeting in January, we can do that.
No. Look, I'm happy with your suggestion that if there's just a paragraph summary under each of these, which will just provide much better context than just what's essentially a description.
Can I also suggest, if you wish, to provide in the summary the link to where the plan is on the website? So Councillor Bevan, when he's up late at night and wants something better to read, he can.
Absolutely.
Chairman, Councillor Dick.
No, he's just staring.
Paragraph 8, the budget, 145 contracted budget, 1 FTE possum control, 400 in contracted budget for wide-scale predator control. I'm assuming that's annual.
Correct.
It is. What will be the general rate implication of that?
So what we've done is we've included those figures in this whole conversation around the LTP and the business cases. So that sits within the material you're seeing around the business cases. So it would have obviously a rating impact, but it will have that alongside any decisions you make around the long-term plan and rating. Yep.
So that's already in a draft long-term plan paper.
That's already in the business cases, as I understand it, for the.
Yep. I've got a bit of catching up to do on that.
Councillor Bailey?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Campbell, page 10, I think it's paragraph 11 and 12, there's the lovely little graph about possum control area annual RTC monitoring. And you talk about how, sounds to me, what I'm reading there was that there's the problem's getting worse. It's not improving like it was. Is there a point where we sort of like lose control of the number of possums again, if it goes back to what it was previously?
So what you're seeing in that, yes, the short answer is what you're seeing in that graph is a very slow trend towards increased possum numbers. And there is a risk over time, if we weren't to act over the next 3 to 5 years, that you will hit a tipping point where biologically their numbers will go up in an increasing scale. So that's the potential risk, but actually we believe that if we act over the next 12 to 24 months, that actual risk won't manifest itself.
Okay, cool. Further question, paragraph 18, you talk about input costs of $3 to $4 a hectare for long-term maintenance of predator pests on farmland, yada, yada, yada. One of the things that came up in one of the presentations yesterday was that there are obviously economic benefits as well. I would have liked to have seen, and it's all very well saying putting in costs here, but that could well be offset by benefits that come from it, so that would have been nice to have seen in there. And the other one was paragraph 24, talking about feral goats, Councillor Wilson's favourite topic, and effective controls. It's difficult. Well, you're trying to get agreement for effective control between you've got that fence. What do you call it, over the good neighbour over the fence thing? So what you're suggesting there to me, what the paragraph is suggesting to me, is that if there is no agreement between the parties, then we have to come in with a regulation on top of that to make sure it happens, or how's in practicalities? How do you see that working?
So what we're proposing to do with feral goats, and you've got to keep in mind that with feral goats, it's actually quite difficult to effectively control them in our hill country, and there's a lot of cost involved. So whatever we don't want to do, we don't want to end up putting a regulatory solution in place which creates more problems than the actual issue we've got. So what we're proposing is that we actually have in the regional pest plan a good neighbour rule, and that sits and underpins a conversation between two neighbours around any issues they've got with feral goat management. So in other words, if one neighbour is planting and one neighbour is using goats for farm management and they can't work out their solution together, then there is the option to come to council and there's a regulatory bottom line. This is very much how it works for our phytosanitary pest management strategy, and in that instance it's actually the industry who polices the final bottom line before coming to council for compliance action.
So that kind of sounds to me like how the Fencing Act works in town. If you have two neighbours who disagree on the type of fence, you go back to someone else to make a decision. Yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yep. I think Councillor Kurt was next.
Kurt, you've been with him for quite a while, I think you should have a go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Campbell, I just wanted to pursue you again. I think it might be after your biodiversity conference successes of yesterday. I want to ask you about biodiversity and its appearance in this document. Put you to the sword, really, Campbell. If we achieved, this is a 20-year, I'm reading that it's a 20-year document. Is that your understanding? I'm seeing that in the introduction. It's sort of a 20-year horizon. If we kill all these things that you're wanting to kill here, what will our biodiversity and our environment look like?
So there's a range of things which you would expect to see with large-scale predator control in terms of environmental outcomes. One of those outcomes is actually obviously increased bird life. Another one will be increased invertebrates, skinks, lizards, geckos, those sorts of things. So a whole range of those things benefit from reduced predation. But you'd also expect to see not just environmental but other potential benefits as well. Toxoplasmosis has an economic impact on our sheep farming community. So there's other outcomes outside of just the environmental. And realistically, when we include predators, we're including things like possums, obviously, and they have a significant browse impact. So there's a range of outcomes that will benefit from predator control.
Do you think, therefore, we ought to be much more explicit? And I'm not clear on what the Biosecurity Act and its requirements on you to do what you're doing in this are, the parameters of it, but are we precluded from specifying some really hairy, big biodiversity outcomes for the whole region, from stating that sort of outcome desire in this document? Are we able to do it, and do you think we should, in terms of a connected, integrated approach to this document and all our other activity?
So biosecurity is one of the activities that contributes to biodiversity outcomes, and it's a significant contributor to it in some cases. The short answer to your question is absolutely yes, we could make the connection between the importance of biosecurity activities and biodiversity outcomes within the regional pest management plan. So we could, and I believe should, do that, yes.
will you?
Yes, absolutely. We can. Yep.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you for recognising me, Chair. It's
My pleasure.
I'd like to look at this paper in context of, with a particular around climate change and our strategy to it, and pests, and focus on Fenton's favourite topic, goats.
This won't go.
We've got a beard. I see what we're going to do here, but I have had an experience before. We had significant flooding issues and a range of other issues in the Coromandel, where people were going to put in expensive engineering options to solve. In the end, it became clear that the real problem was a lack of vegetation cover, and it was the goats. So rather than go and spend a lot of money putting in stop banks and so on, we got Doc in to go and bomb up all the goats. The growth regrew, and it held the water on the lands, and the flooding impact went down. So that's a very, very particular lesson. It seems to be, here we are going to go and look about planting a lot more trees on the hills and do all the rest of it, and we've got all of these predators out there chomping the way through it, predators. And so how is this good neighbour rule, etc., which seems to be a very soft, light-handed approach to this, going to work with our drive to replant large parts of the province in trees, if they're going to just provide the goats with more food to grow more goats? So I think that things have got to be tied together a bit better, and with me, I just don't see this as. So what I'm asking is, how can we make sure that what we're doing here in predator control is going to be complementary and add to our aims in in climate change and other areas?
So I think I want to differentiate there between predator control and goats. So there's absolutely some things which we're talking about already in terms of predator control and its contribution to biodiversity. So that's a clear link, and we're making that link hopefully for you. In terms of goats, look, in reality, so we're not going to end up planting the whole region at once. Even if we're ambitious and successful in that ambition of doing 10,000 hectares a year, it's still only 10,000 hectares a year. And there's large areas, the other 190,000 plus hectares, will have goats on it, which have impacts, but they might not be the level of impact you want to invest in a control program, because that will be expensive. And so the reality is, in terms of goat control, this good neighbour rule allows us to, where it's appropriate and necessary, to actually target the security of the planting. So to target control to where we want to do control to get the security of plantings. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a regional scale goat control problem is not the companion to a regional scale afforestation program. A targeted goat control program is part of that deal. Does that make sense?
I get the logic of what you're saying. I'm not sure that I'm agreeing with you.
Two areas, Campbell. Firstly, with the ramped up effort to control possums and stop them blowing out, are we able to do that with a targeted rate, or is it going to be out of a general rate, or what?
So we've had, I think, a very useful start to that conversation in, I think it was the last meeting, where Councillor Curtin raised the importance of recognising the general ratepayer's contribution to biodiversity outcomes generated from biosecurity activities. So I think the answer to that question is it is going to be a combination of the targeted rate and a general rate, and what we really need to settle on is what's the balance that's appropriate.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering where, because you're going to end up with hotspots, aren't you, where you're going to have to make greater effort with more resource, and that's going to come down to some farmers who aren't doing the job, and I'm thinking that it would be appropriate in those circumstances to have a targeted rate.
So the targeted rate will absolutely be part of the funding solution for predator control activities. Yep. And where farmers are not necessarily doing enough, having already committed long-term to the program, then there's a compliance pathway that we can follow, and that's recoverable in terms of costs.
Okay.
Yep.
So the other area I just wanted a quick chat about is this marine biosecurity, and what you're planning to do is to be able to examine hulls of boats to see whether they've got unwanted pests on them. Are you able to get something into the resource management plan now, are you?
Into the regional pest management plan, we can absolutely put in a rule around level of whole fouling, and that gives us powers under the Biosecurity Act to take boats out of the water and inspect them, and when appropriate have them cleaned. Yep.
Okay, so how do you know which boats to target?
So that, in the end, there's a range of ways you sort of work through your risk pathway. So which ports are they coming from? I mean, some ports have higher risk as in terms of them coming to us than others. So what's the history of that vessel? Some vessels have a very different maintenance history to others. So there's ways you can start to screen down which boats you want to look at. And then sometimes, quite frankly, one of the last ones was simply the harbour master noting that the type of boat and where it was from, and he just simply made the comment to our staff, and that triggered the having a look at it.
So you're satisfied we'll have quite good intelligence to be able to target appropriately. What about boats coming into Napier Port? Because you're clearly not going to be able to lift them out of the water.
So in terms of the bigger vessels, you mean? Look, ultimately, the other key thing to keep in mind about marine biosecurity is we have a part to play, but it's part of a bigger national system. I really struggle to see the context where you would try and take action against a large vessel. But that's not, I don't think, in this case, the role we're talking about. At the national level, there's things called craft risk management standards, which now are about to become, in 2018, required for all international vessels coming into New Zealand. So they're around hull fouling and those sorts of things. That's a national MPI-driven initiative, which we are trying to complement, but I don't think we're trying to get to doing large vessels in our context.
If I could just add that I understand the Ministry for Primary Industries is ramping up capability to do compliance and enforcement work in relation to that standard. So large vessels coming from overseas coming to New Zealand will be inspected and visited, including before they actually make their way into New Zealand ports.
So MPI will have their own staff doing that?
They will, yes they will. So they'll be boarding vessels, etc.
So we're part of a solution, but there's obviously MPI. Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
I'll move.
Seconder?
Oh, second.
Councillor Curtin, a second. Would you like to speak, Debbie?
Thanks, Campbell.
Thank you.
That's it.
I do want to comment and to thank Campbell for his work in this area and for his work in biodiversity. And I see these two topics intimately linked, as you may have guessed, and so does Campbell, which I'm very pleased about. One of the things that occurs to me in this report is a continued focus, though, on, if you like, the economic outcomes, the choice of pest control and management based on some economic driver. I'm more interested now to flip that over and to have recognised the biodiversity values in themselves and the merits thereof. I think we ought to be singing that song a lot more than we have been, and then to, in fact, enter in the conversation that says this is a whole of community approach. It's inevitable, in my view, that a singular land-based approach to this, or land ownership base, is not going to be enough to meet the expectations of weed and pest control. We need to turn it and make it an entire community commitment to do such. So I wonder whether we could weave a little bit more commentary about where we're heading over the next 20 years that potentially looks like that, just to give you another 3 hours of overnight thinking around this, Campbell. Thank you for your report.
I'd like to thank you for the report, Campbell. I'd also like to thank you for your enthusiasm for this, and I'd like to thank you for your commitment to it. And I hope you carry on with this for a long time to come, because I sense that community attitudes are changing slowly, bit by bit, And I think that over a period of time, this province can have a radically different approach to biodiversity, pests and weeds, and we can make this a really great place that we're all proud of. It's been, I think, a significant change over the last 20 years of my living here, and I think it'll be even much better in the future. And this is great work. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? If not, call the question. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Campbell? Item 9, I guess, Hotspot Freshwater Improvement Projects.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there is a presentation that the team's going to come up to the table now. I think they're all going to come up because there's a bit of a tag team here. We just thought useful to have another round of updates on the projects because I'm sure from a distance the pond looks pretty serene and the ducks are quietly moving around on it, but I can tell you that underneath there's a lot of moving feet in these bodies of work, and as you'll see there's been quite a bit of progress, particularly close to home, that the team can step you through. So I'll hand it over. Just flip that microphone up.
Hi. So just to quickly recap, there was $1 million, 6 hotspots. 2 of those hotspots, Tutera and Whakakī, part of the Freshwater Improvement Fund application, so we're still working through that process. So there's no actions actually happening there right now. So we hope to sign the deed in January with MFE to move forward. And the other hotspots. Oops. Do I use the... So we've got Marine, Ahuriri, Karamu and Tukituki. So I'll start off with Anna. She's here to give a pretty exciting update on what she's been doing in the estuary.
You might have seen within your agenda items that this Monday was the start of our Phragmitis removal in the upper estuary. I've actually brought some show and tell, so you see what I'm talking about. So I shall pass this round. Don't eat it. You can smell it if you like. This is actually quite dry and old stuff, so it doesn't smell too funky. I was trying to get a nice fresh clump like that to bring in because it's really quite bad. Also bites a lot. But that's okay. Just don't rub it up and down. It's a bit scratchy. So we've been in the upper estuary now for 2.5 days. As a close of business yesterday, 45.4 tonnes of that material has been taken out of the estuary. That is massive and a huge success as far as I'm concerned. We had 2 people in the water on Monday, a digger driver and a digger. Unfortunately, a digger driver, digger and a dump truck. Unfortunately, the digger can actually only reach 13 metres out, and it's about an 80 metre corridor that we need to try and get the Phragmitis out of, about 10 metres to 20 metres wide. So our problem was trying to get the mounds of this stuff, which, if you just shoot back one, the mounds of this stuff which go all the way along, close enough for the digger to actually pick it up. This stuff is really, really soft mud, so there's no way that the digger can go in there. We will never see the digger again. As it is, we have walking out there, we have waders, mudders, which are shoes that splay like snowshoes to help us to walk through the mud. If you don't have mudders on, you'll probably sink to about here in soft mud. So that first 10 metres, that's where they used to dredge the channel back in the 90s, and so it's just filled up with that really sludgy mud. The Phragmitis extended all that way across, and that's where we were worried about that flushing upstream and downstream. But we're breaking up these mounds, bringing them back up. Each sort of mound will weigh about 40 kilos, so it's a very, very manual process. Very manual. Putting it on a dinghy, pulling that dinghy in, goes into the digger on the dump truck, gets dumped at a clean fill site. Within the course of about a week, it'll smother and die off, and then it'll just be turned over until you'll see once it's dry, it'll get down to quite a chalky consistency, and we'll be able to compact it quite well. That was the first load, which was 8.1 tonne of the material. We've been really pleased with how much we've been able to get out without taking too much of the mud and other stuff with it. A few crabs have died in the interest of marine biosecurity, but they'll be all right. We managed to save a few eels. But basically, for the Whakapomatis removal, it's going really well. We put a call out, Jolene put a call out yesterday to increase our levels of manpower, and Works Group responded really well, and we managed to get 3 more hard-working folk out from Works Group today. So hopefully by the end of today, we'll have 60 tonne removed. I'm pretty impressed with that. I'm pretty pleased.
60 out of how many?
Yeah, okay, so we have no idea how much. To be honest, when we sort of started talking about this, they said, how much material do you... I said, oh, just a dump truck, it'll be fine. It'll crush down to nothing, it'll be fine. It's about the 20th dump truck load we've taken. And I have to say, it has actually expanded in its foothold between when we planned this project and when we went back out to actually get the tidal delay. We went out and went, wow, geez, that's concerning that it had expanded more than we thought it was.
Do you have any video of this?
We do. We had yesterday we had Local Focus, New Zealand Herald videos out. They've done a little piece. Helen Shea has done a little piece to put onto. It's on our Facebook page at the moment. We are trying to get airport permission to do a little bit of a drone flight, but it is a low-flying training area, so that it comes with a bit of issues around how we can fly the drone.
So can I just ask you 2 questions?
Sure.
Firstly, what is the mischief that these things do? And when you're successful in taking how many ever dump trucks away out, remind me to ask you to offer to do a job with you. What do you expect the end result to be?
Okay, so in its own, the stuff isn't too bad on its own, where it is supposed to be, when it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's called an ecosystem engineer because it becomes a biogenic habitat, a habitat that's made from another animal. And it becomes home to crabs, it's fish, it cleans the water because it's a filter feeder, it feeds fish, feeds birds. The problem, like any invasive, is when it grows out of control and you start getting way too much of the stuff. And the reason we're getting way too much of the stuff is because it starts to create its own perfect habitat. So in that slide where we had the reef across, it's creating sediment stabilisation. So that area is becoming really quiescent and quiet, the sediment drops out, hey, perfect habitat for me to grow even more on. And it will preferentially grow on its own adults. So it just grows up and up and up. So on its own, it's not a bad thing. The bad thing occurs when we get this, and it's just growing out of control, and there's no flushing in between the upper estuary and lower estuary. In terms of what we think will happen once it comes out, we hope that we will get a much better flowing regime. We've got meters all up the estuary, so we're hoping to see better dissolved oxygen, less macroalgae growth. That really, you can probably see it there, the stuff here, this green filamentous stuff. Again, because this clarifies the water, which we typically think is being a really good thing, it allows this to grow better. So we're hoping to see just a more healthy, I sort of liken it to breathing. We hope the estuary can breathe again a bit better.
Okay.
So if we were conducting a sweepstake on how long it would take before we'll need to do this again, what would your number of years be?
So I'm hoping that if we can really nail it and keep on top of it, it would be 5 to 10 years before we'd, no, famous last words, I am really taking a bit of a stab in the dark here. But it's taken about 4 to 5 years for us to reach this kind of biomass. This removal, coupled with us trying to look at sediment control on land, nutrient control on land, I'm hopeful that we will start to be able to actually naturally come across it. The only control method we have is manual removal. There is other areas where they've talked about things like diverting freshwater flow through, but it's so adaptable to all kind of different salinities that I just don't think we'd have enough freshwater system to actually, and you'd end up changing the whole estuary system. So
Councillor, it is a bit of it's a pilot here, as nobody's done this sort of thing in New Zealand before. Internationally, there we go. But I guess the point is that we will have to have some ongoing maintenance of this. So ideally, we'll figure out techniques to improve, to become more efficient at removing it. and hopefully expand the periods between having to do more maintenance. But as Anna points out, it's a critical thing identified in her studies to help with estuary health, so we've really got to.
Can I say, in terms of communications around this particular little project, social media has been really, the response on social media has been really, really positive. I don't know, I've got over 100 and something comments back on this particular project, and they've all gone, wow, about time, how can I help, what can I do, all sorts of stuff, so thanks so much.
I was looking for an old drag line somewhere that'll give you a better reach in 13 metres.
Yeah, so we've inquired about that. The only guy who does it has 3, all in
Right.
different states of disrepair.
Yeah.
So he's the contractor we're using on this, and he actually came out yesterday and said, yep, the way you're doing it, it's the only way I can see you doing it. To be fair, I mean, even though we say it's we only had 2 people in the water on Monday, we've got 8 out there today, and so that's 3 days. In terms of the efficiency, for what we're getting out of it and the cost probably in time and equipment, I don't think we're doing too badly. I know it seems like a hard ask because it is very manual and we always sort of look to ways to automate it, but it's not bad. We're getting there, I think.
Councillor,
I know there's a bigger presentation, but just don't want to dwell on this, but is that the only site, or is there other sites colonising elsewhere, or?
Okay, so Ahuriri is the site that it's been most prevalent in, and it's formed the biggest biomass in. What we've done is there's this one bund, there's another bund just like it, or a reef structure further up. It's also dotted in spots. You can sort of see it in the top right of the picture. It's dotted in spots pretty much up and down the whole estuary. So we had the digger run from the start of it and get what it could from the stop bank, and then and take that out up to this bund. Then we're concentrating on this bund. The digger will come in, take out the material we've shifted. Then he'll replace, he'll take up his rocks and his platform, put that at the top bund. Waitangi, we did find some in Waitangi, so that will be our next stop, is to go down there, do a bit of a smoke survey, see what we can see in terms of its extent, try and get it out. Also in Prevenson, or the county waterway, which is outside Senator Boats by the expressway, Taradale Road, so we'll tackle that as part of this project, get it out from there, and pretty much hopefully anywhere we see it, we'll just get it out.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Anna. Can you tell us what is the most significant factor, environmental factor, or contributor or contaminant that is likely to be driving the explosion of this in the water?
So internationally, salinity is pretty much the key factor for its growth and reproduction. The fact that it's here, it's not in the mouth of the estuary, and then it's also in the county waterway, to me implies and the literature says it's tolerant to a wide range of salinities. I honestly couldn't tell you which factor has created this boom of biomass. It has happened before, but typically where else it happens internationally is more problematic in marinas and harbours, where it's more of a social or aesthetic issue. So they concentrate their remediation in terms of that, so anti-fouling, scraping, which they've said don't do the manual scraping because it all drops to the bottom and basically creates a new habitat for, so that's why we're taking it out off-site. But it could be anything from the fact that we have had significant reductions in, well, I believe, I don't know that they're significant, but reductions in freshwater flow over the years. We've had pine forestry, obviously. Pine forestry is known to suck water out of the landscape a lot, so you do get some decreases in your water going into your final catchment. Obviously the Esk used to divert into it prior to the earthquake, the Tutakuri diverted into it prior to the earthquake. There were works done in the channels of the lowland area in the Ahuriri drainage basin that may have salinated the water a bit more to come in at the top end. So many factors going on that it would be nigh on impossible to tease out which factor has been the key one to actually creating the biomass explosion.
Probably need to move. Thank you.
So continuing from the Ahuriri hotspot, we've also developing an integrated catchment management plan. So it's being scoped out with Mana Ahuriri and Napier City Council at the moment. A land action plan. So we've got Andrew Burton currently looking at the catchment, identifying different points and what's happening. He'll use this information to characterise the catchment and point out where the critical sources are, what are the issues, and create an action plan from that. And then that becomes the catchment works. So already, although he hasn't finished that plan, we needed him to give us some information so we could order plants. So he will present that land action plan to you in early next year. But we have already got a plan to order the following 250 native plants, 2,000 plus wetland plants, 1,500 pole plants, and 1,500 sleeves to go with that, and it's approximately 2 kilometres long. So that will develop more in the space.
So the native plants, Andrew has been scoping out a work that's going on in Wairoa, I think it is, using native plants rather than necessarily pole planting, and specific sleeves that can be used in order to prevent the browsing activity on them. So it'll be nice to be able to try and do some bank stabilisation using native plantings. And the final one's catchment hydrology, which is just going back to what I was referring to about the freshwater. How much freshwater does our estuary actually need to function properly? It's not something we've looked at before. It's not part of any water balance model that's been done for any of the catchment plans. So it's something we need to know in order to look at how much water is coming in and how we can, elsewhere in New Zealand, they sometimes take particularly areas like pine forestry out of the equation as an abstraction to provide for enough water for downstream users. So that's the last part of it.
There you go.
Oh, right.
The next hotspot is marine, and Anna's also leading this one.
So the marine hotspot is slightly different in the fact that it's not, its main focus isn't on improving water quality over the next 12 months, it's on increasing our understanding and knowledge of our marine system. There's 2 major projects, one led by myself, one led by Oliver Wade. Oliver Wade is leading the hydrodynamic model project, and what that's looking at is starting using base models that have already been developed for the Bay, for Hastings District Council and potentially the Port of Napier, to identifying where some of our critical issues are happening, large algal blooms, sediment plumes, etc. Cawthron looking at that, and then looking at how we need to apply our model over the top of that and where to focus our very, very fine grid in order, because you can't just go over the whole bay with a really fine grid, you've got to focus areas. And that will refine the model to say, in this area here, where we see an issue, what are the critical sources coming into that area, where are the hydrodynamics bringing that water from. So the second one is a collaborative study that we're hoping to do with NIWA, MPI and local hapu, looking at the Wairoa hard as a nursery habitat for snapper, and just looking at what changes have occurred since its closure in 1987 and whether or not it's still maintaining the services that it used to maintain and the reason it was closed.
It was closed as a fishing area?
Yeah, so it's always been identified as unique habitat for nursery grounds because of its cobble. It also had large algal kelp forests, but they kept getting caught in the trawlermen's nets, so they closed the kelp forest and closed and fished it, and then MPI, or Ministry of Fisheries, or whatever it may have been known as back in the day, closed the area and nothing sort of happened. We don't know the current state of it. We don't know whether the algae come back. We don't know whether it still supports those nursery habitats that it's valued for. We don't know if we're fulfilling what we need to fulfil, and this is with MPI, that's why it's a collaborative study. It's not all on regional council, whether land-based impacts, either fishing impacts, and we don't know whether or not just by closing it and leaving it there, we're doing the best by that. Maybe we could be looking at some reseeding of algae, maybe we could be looking at some positive solutions to help it repair itself later on.
So Te Tera one of our hotspots, is a program we're working on at the moment, which is for 4 years. So we're tied in with $200,000 for the next 4 years. That's our plan for improvements in Tutira. As mentioned in the paper, the air curtain, which we installed in September this year, great success. Unfortunately, we took the risk that if we did that now, which would be a great result for the community and meeting our freshwater objectives, we were doing it outside of signing the deed with MFE, and they can't include that in this funding round because it would be setting a precedent, because there was other organisations that also wanted to start work on their projects and they'd said no. So we are working on how we'll be paying for that with Manga Hareru Tangatu Trust, who are partnering to do this project with. We're planning on putting an air curtain, approximately between 70 and 80 here. Just still waiting for the surveyor and final legal easement payments to come through. So an air curtain in Tutira. So it's been very successful to date, and we hope that we can do that next year. We plan to do that straight away. Another deliverable is the Papakuri stream connection. So that's getting it back in line where it used to be, and also a diversion strengthening around that to ensure that it's stabilised. Also sediment traps. Summer coming up next year, 2018-19, there'll be 40 hectares of harvesting. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for that, so we have sediment traps in the right places to ensure that those catchments can collate anything that's coming down from the hills. We've got there the southern outlet for longitudinal flow, so that comes through from Tutira right through Wakapiro to Ōrākei. That's still under consideration because there's a lot of sensitivities around doing that, so we're just organising meetings with the local community to ensure that it meets what everyone would like the overarching plan for Tutira to be. A cultural health index will be created. We'll also have a monitoring regime and upgrade the existing equipment and ongoing riparian planting. So that's for Tutira. So as I said, we haven't gone over the line yet with the Ministry for the Environment, but we are filling in the documentation and everything's looking really good.
Yeah, just to be clear though, we obviously have the funding for that. The frustration is that we've spent the money and we couldn't leverage it. So dollar for dollar leverage out of the Crown for the fifth funding. So effectively $70,000 we can't get out of the Crown for the project because of their intractability around their dates. But it was important that we couldn't put the curtain in now because of risks of turning the lake over and creating more problems than we were looking to solve. It needed to be done in the winter. It was an important step for us to be convinced that doing it in a big lake would work. So just the fall of the dice meant that we lose a bit of leverage out of the project. But as Jolene says, we're working with Mangahuru too to see whether we can kind of salvage some of that with their Te Mana Te Wai fund that they have for the lake edge riparian activities they're doing.
Can I suggest in that respect, Ian, that Tutira Mana Iwi expects an awful lot of that money to come back, all those funds to come back and through the project somehow. There was a risk on their part to pick up the funding of the air curtain, and I think we'd be disingenuous if we didn't make every attempt to fully cover those costs somehow. I totally get that it's a timing thing and it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and at the end of the day the money all goes towards restoring the health of the lake. So I'd be really pleased to see that happen, because I've got to admit it was a bit embarrassing at the last trust meeting to have that thrown at me and having to deal with that issue as I went through. The other point we discussed at the last trust meeting was how the Tutira Mana Iwi project, how we end up collaborating with the Freshwater Improvement Fund work that we're looking at doing in Upper Catchment, but we'll sit down and have that discussion at some stage with everyone, I'm sure.
Yes, it's Tutira. And Whakakei, I'll actually, Andy, talk to this one.
sure. No, you don't need to do that anymore. Good. So we won't go back there, will we? So it's so whakakē. I think I've already explained the broader concepts in this project to everybody. So I might just go through some of the, what's changed and what we're getting stuck into now, rather than going through the project outline. Or would you like me to start with sort of the project outline to get everyone on the same page?
I think everyone knows.
Everyone knows?
Yep.
Yep, cool. So same as with Tūtera, so there's FIF funding for the whakakē project. Well, we're going through that process to try to secure it. And that means we can't really do a whole lot on the ground before that's the deed's been signed. And so what we're busy doing at the moment is just getting relationships set up and securing land and trying to get some good policy around how things are going to be managed going forward. So Nicholas Caviali, who many of you will know, he just got the Green Ribbon Award for his work up at Whangawihi and elsewhere. He's the project manager. He's been doing a really good job talking to people and trying to get everyone on the same page and trying to put together a project which is going to keep as many people happy for as much of the time as possible. And so that's meant a couple of changes to the original proposal that we put forward. Two big ones. One is the Waikutuku diversion. So there's a little creek that comes into the main inflow to the lake, which is a little creek. At the moment, that points straight towards the lake, and there's been quite a bit of interest in turning that around and pointing it so that it goes to the eastern, goes east and goes to the end of the Rahui Channel, so that when the Rahui Channel is open, it goes straight to sea. So a diagram may have been useful there actually. But so you've got the lake, you've got the Rahui Channel, and then it gets open down here. The Waikutuku diversion at the moment goes this way straight into the lake, and they just want to point it that way so that it goes more direct to the sea. And importantly, they see a lot of that silt going straight into the lake and settling out, rather than settling in the Rahui Channel and then being flushed out. And so there's about $100,000 of work to do there, and we've rejigged some components of the project to try to fit that in, and that'll keep some quite vocal members of the community on side, which will be quite useful for the overall outcomes in the project, as well as having ecological benefits, which is also important. And then the other big change is there's Gary Close currently designing a weir again on that Rahui Channel area, so that one of the biggest points of tension at the moment has been about this time of year when lake levels are high. There's been a real reluctance to open the lake because it means the water level drains very, very low. Then if you have a dry summer, the lake level gets lower and lower, and we've had some really catastrophic fish kills, and it doesn't help the algal bloom dynamic either. So there's a real reluctance from those ecological, from the perspective of those ecological values, to open the lake at this time of year. But it's also a very important time of year for farming, and all of those low-lying areas being underwater for a long period of time when people are trying to get stuff done has caused a lot of tension. And so this weir is trying to cut through both of those things, so it'll provide security in terms of an upper water level, and it'll also mean that the lake level stalls and stops draining out, and so we've got a minimum lake level as well. So it'll just give us far greater control over that lake level management, and again hopefully keep a lot more people on side, as well as achieving the bigger objectives that were planned for this whakakē project. And the current estimate was 340,000 or thereabouts. Less than 500,000, which is good because that's what we originally thought it was going to be. And so I described that recirculating wetland concept when I first outlined this proposal, and most of that money is just going to come off that. So we're going to have a much smaller recirculating wetland, and these other two things are going to be put in place. So there's just sort of a shift in the way the assets are going to be funded. And so they're two big changes. And I guess what I'm quite buoyed about at the moment is that Nicholas has got a lot of support for planting manuka in that on that western end of the lake. So there's already some agreement about where we can put the manuka that we've proposed, and he's also secured the land more or less. So there's agreement in principle, and I think they just need to put it to a vote for the various owners of that land for a little patch at the eastern end where we can put that recirculating wetland. So there's already some land being earmarked to be included in the project, which is quite critical for the project going forward. And those other two things we think are just going to help everything get across the line.
What's this recirculating wetland? What does that actually do?
So the idea, if you can imagine dredging, so the usual way you dredge is you've got you've either got a suction pipe or a digger, like what Anna's doing is essentially dredging. That's a lot of cost associated with the mechanical aspect of moving the soil physically around. The recirculating wetland will just use a pipe with an inlet that floats around passively and sucks the water. And so as it sucks the water, it sucks the sediment along with it, and then it'll redeposit that sediment on the land and in the wetland itself. So you're essentially getting the water to be a truck moving the sediment, and then it drops out on the land before that water then goes back into the lake. So it's like a passive dredging.
So in effect, you'll reclaim a bit of land while you're draining the water, sort of thing.
It'll be, that's interesting you point that out, because where it's going is sand dune sort of area, and there has been an intention to try to farm those areas, but the soil's just rubbish and it dries out and it doesn't have much silt in it. So this will be putting silt into that sand dune, so it might turn out to be a bit of a reclaimed land, but it's not going to be turning wetland into land. It'll be, most of that sediment will drop out on already dry land. It's just it will be reclaiming in the sense of reclaiming a sand dune, potentially.
Do you do that on Lake Artuma?
Yeah, so that's interesting as well. The concept could potentially work for Whātuma. You'd want to look at the residence times of that lake and the relative contributions from the inflows. So you can only pump so much water. Well, it costs a lot of money to pump more water, and so I just need to look at how much water goes into Whātuma and how much you'd actually be taking out with this approach. The thing about Whakake is there's not a whole lot of water that goes in there most of the time. The big storms come in, drop it all out, and then it just sits there. There's no natural outflow, whereas Whātuma's got an inflow and an outflow, so it's already got quite a bit of water moving through it, and that flushing might already be happening as much as we might be able to achieve with this recirculating wetland. But yeah, that's a good idea to investigate. Whātuma's certainly loitering in the background there in terms of needing to do something there. So we could look at that potentially if we get direction.
Okay, I think we can move.
Tuki. So Nicola McHaffey is the project lead, and she is working on two wetland projects. The first one, there's an image there you can see of the plan that she would like to achieve, and there is the yellow line is a pathway that goes through the middle. The blue line is the actual waterway, and there's significant planting on both sides. This is to be an education site for the community, where the community can come along and engage and learn about what's happening here and how we do riparian planting. There's a lot of community engagement with regards to planting, which will happen in June. So to date, weed control has happened. There'll be more weed control in the new year. Unfortunately, because they removed some of the willows, there's been erosion, so the streams moved, so they now need to redesign where the path is going to go, so they need to get back on site and do that. But yeah, so that's progressing well, and there are a few options for the second wetland site, so that's still up for consideration based on some science information.
James, just worked for me, and you just said, Jolene said there's been a lot of community consultation, stakeholder engagement, but I haven't been included in any of that, and I would really like to be. So if that can be passed on, please.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a slightly different question. I can't quite get my head on the map you've got there. Where exactly is it?
It's just outside of Takapau.
I can't tell you, sorry.
I'm just,
I don't know.
Sorry, just outside of Takapau. There's a lot of, north, south, east, west.
We'll get a more detailed map and send it circular.
I just want to,
Just to
I
pinpoint
can't get it in my head where it is, that's all.
Yeah.
I see down the bottom you've got a lake there, but that don't seem right either.
No, so at the bottom, just here, that was an old dump site.
Is that, I get that, but but it's superimposed as over a lake. Is that?
Existing stream.
There's a stream, the blue line's the stream.
Yeah, but does that, it just seems to me there's a map on top of a map there.
Right, so that's actually area for planting. So that's where, so there's the original satellite image, and on top of that, mapped out where they're planting. It's a plan to where we will plant, and then they can use a tool to size that up and establish how many plants will be required.
Sure. Just to the bottom right-hand corner. Take the bottom right-hand corner of the picture you've got up there.
Oh, sorry, down here.
It's just
Yeah.
a paddock.
Deer, thanks.
It's a paddock. It's a ploughed
It's paddock.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
It just seemed like, I thought, well, is that trying to tell me it's a lake, a muddy lake? That's so far to me. You've got that long. I can't. I can't get it in my head. Thank you.
Railway is here, I understand.
Yeah, all right.
Can I just endorse to what Debbie has said? With the Tai Whenua, I haven't heard anything about this work being carried out. So maybe if you just want to be in contact with the Tai Whenua to let us know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought Nicola did raise it at our last meeting that we had 2 or 3 months ago. But look, we'll come back and have that chat.
Thank you.
Part of this hotspot is fencing at Krieger Range, so there's a high flood area behind Krieger Range there, and so they're looking at options for flexible fencing and biodegradable, so that when the area does flood, the fencing will just bend, and any debris that comes down will just move it along and it will biodegrade.
So for many of you, you'll probably recognise this as the mixed small property that features reasonably frequently featured in various photos of stock and waterways. And we've always had the issue or the problem put to us of fencing close to flood-prone areas. So we're looking at a solution here.
So, sorry, Ian, what you're suggesting there is that there's one particular owner who concluded that there was an issue with fencing because it's flood prone, and we've been prepared to come in and put the fence up for them? Or?
Yeah, it's a win-win, because the reality is it is a flood-prone area. It's an area that, like most catchments, particularly the bottom end, you end up with areas, even in our own reserve areas that we manage and control and have fences in, we periodically lose fences for flooding. There's an opportunity to test a product to see whether this is a solution that we can then advocate for, push elsewhere in the catchment or the region.
I like that. I like that. Test a product. I like that. That's good.
Okay.
Okay, Fatuma, so as part of this, willow control is happening, and it's a community project which is funded by DOC. Okay, the last hotspot, Karamu. So Ant Castle, down the back there, has been making great progress actually in the Karamu, and has managed to, from original plans, scale down one of the original wetlands, then enabling us to attack other issues in other areas within the Karamu. So we've got Brookvale Wetland, Karamu Clive, Pakipaki, Bridge Pa, and Kaharaniki. So just quickly go over the proposed plans. So we have here the Brookvale Wetland. We scaled that blue area down, which enabled us to use the funding elsewhere. This wetland, currently there's biodiversity issues, the water quality is not great, there's a lot of weed, there's a temporary fence that's in place. So Ant has a plan for weed control, which is happening, actually already has happened in November this month, putting up some fencing and doing some riparian planting. So all the planting in the Karamu will happen in June, 16th of June roughly. So right now is for all of these hotspot areas within the Karamu is weed control, which will happen again in the new year to prepare the site for planting.
So the other important point to many of you probably recognise this. This is the pond in Havelock North. So stock exclusion and beautification of this obviously has not just the obvious water quality benefits.
Could I ask a question about the planting? One of the issues...
Yes, you may.
Sorry?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. You've benevolent terrains all over us. About the planting, One of the issues for us in the Karamu is a combination of the nutrient load and the water temperature. And the fact is that we have stripped back from the Karamu all of the trees. And most of the plantings I see so far are of flaxes, which will shade zip, nothing. So when we're going to go and put some plantings there, are we looking to put in trees which will grow up to be sufficiently tall that they'll shade the Karamu and help cool it down?
I'll let Ant answer because he's ordered the plants.
Okay, and with that, can we have, do we have a planting plan that we can have a look to check that we're all okay?
I don't have a specific plan, but we've got our standard list of about 30 native species, which includes the kakatea and mero and the tōtara, the larger trees, which will shade that. So shade a water body like that for, but yeah, Andy's knows a lot about that as well, so it won't happen all throughout the day, but yeah, it'll provide some effective shading.
So do we not have a profile for our plantings? I would have thought when we're going to do riparian plantings, we would have had set out a profile, this there, that there, and have a profile, so we would see it looking to the end.
It's possible, yeah. We've been doing that for some sites, doing some typical cross sections of our plantings, and in relation to those some. But generally, no, we're setting up plants. We've got experts that do it on a day-to-day basis, so they've got a pretty good understanding of what those plants will turn into, and what conditions they're suited to.
Okay. But you're not actually helping me with my answer. I want to have confidence that when we plant, that at the end of this, we're going to have trees which will shade the Karamu. That we've got people, planting and doing things. It's all very well and good, but I want to see what the end result is. If you ever go and plant out a garden, the garden knows exactly what it's going to look like at the end. They've got a plan. So what's the plan?
So it's a good point, Councillor, and what we'll do is we'll bring back to you in the next update the planning plan, given it's next winter we're doing this. There is a group internally that's kind of set up loosely to look at how we best do these riparian activities. Like you, I'm very interested in saying, well, if we're going to embark in this area more prolifically in the future in our long-term plan, what does that look like? What sort of species are we going to use? What will work? How are we going to plant them? Gradation from taller to shorter. What's the logic around that? So those are the right questions to ask, and we'll bring you back some detail on that.
I've seen the riparian plantings in Taranaki, and they always have a profile.
Yep.
So when you go, there's a planting profile. They know what they're going to get.
Yep.
And so could we have that come back for the next Environmental Services Committee?
Sure.
Show us what we're going to get here?
Yep.
Yeah.
So at the Karamu Clive, same issues. So weeds, pest, stock. The weed control has already happened. So at this stage, we have done weed control in those light areas. The blue line is where the proposed fence will go to exclude stock. There's a strip in the middle that we're leaving there for access way, and this is underway. Pakipaki. This is a culturally significant site, and there has already been a bit of existing work that has recently happened as part of the Te Karamu strategy plan. The Hotspot Fund has taken it a bit further, so we have done. We're planning to do some additional fencing to close off the last area to ensure that stock exclusion is complete, and also we are planting and weed control. So Bridge Pa, Ant has done a marvellous job of working with the landowner here and getting him to agree, and which he's more than happy to, with a plan of creating a fence on either side of that water, that stream. So right along with a bridge in the middle to enable stock to cross. And meetings are in place shortly when he returns back to finalise the details of the plan. And again, planting will happen in June. There is also some additional planting that needs to be, some weed control and willows, I think it was, that needed to be removed. Yeah, as part of the enhancement.
So this is a real coup, and absolute credit to Anthony for getting this across the line. Many of you might recall the heated challenge we had put to us from Mangarawa Marae, which is sort of mid-right in the corner there around the Awa, which is basically, this is in their back doorstep. The landowner who our chair engaged with was fairly difficult and was unwilling at that time to deal with the issue. Ants managed to work with them and get this across the line, so this is a real coup for us. Getting stock out of this water body, getting it revegetated. It's going to be fantastic for the Bridge Pa community in the Mangarawa Marae.
I accept that it's a coup, it's a real win, because I do know that the landowner was very unimpressed with any suggestions that we have anything to do with him, and he thought that his cows should be able to swim like other people, and so anyway, this is great. But what I would also like to see, I'm sorry to harp on this, but if we're going to replant this, I'd like to see what we're going to plant.
Yes.
We'll bring you that
Potential
back.
lot of planting.
Sorry?
We'll bring you that back.
Yeah, I'd just like to see it.
Yep.
Through you, Chair. Ian, to Ian, you've chosen some spots in this particular project, which seem to me ones that are obviously you've had. There's some real. I can see the sense in where you've selected to do that. In terms of looking forward into the future, you feel that. How do you intend sort of selecting spots that you're going to continue doing this sort of these sort of little projects along the line? Is that going to be based on the whole what you describe as the hotspots for sedimentation in the catchment?
So ultimately, this program will get wrapped up into that new integrated catchments program. So all of the work will sit under that because this is just, if you like, a pilot of that. What we've done in this particular area, as you say, is identified areas where we're going to gain political capital for the council because obviously you folk took a punt in putting it out there and were successful. These are sites the community will see progress in. In fact, all of them are generally, but these ones in particular have particular mileage for us in terms of community engagement and buy-in, so therefore likely support in the future. In the Karamu in particular, it's one that I think, again, there's lots of low-hanging fruit there that we can go to and carry on with easy wins where we've got willing owners, easy access and likely outcomes. The Karamu typically doesn't feature highly in our SEDNet kind of modelling. It's doesn't have a lot of erosive areas, primarily because it's flat, spring-fed. Nonetheless, as Councillor Bark has pointed out, there are significant issues with water quality driven by a lack of riparian vegetation, no shade, lots of rooted macrophytes in the bed, which are impacting in-stream ecology. So part of the logic in revegetating this catchment would be obviously providing shade to exclude macrophytes, woody debris back into the system to drive a more healthy ecosystem.
I thought the problems in the Karamu had a lot to do with the fact that it passes through semi-built-up communities and there's a lot of runoff from roads and roofs and what have you.
Yep. Which are typically addressed through stormwater consents, stormwater discharges. So where the consented activities and the Karamu has a lot of stormwater discharges to it, that's how we'll address it.
By requiring wetlands and whatever to be
certainly requiring higher levels of treatment in the future. So as you're probably aware, there's a stormwater working group as part of TANK that's likely to drive a different standard for stormwater discharges. Yeah.
But the other thing, Peter, if you have a look at that photo on the left there, you'll see a lot of weed in the stream. If that had a proper shading system over it, the weed would be gone. It'd be weed free. And we spend up wholes of money downriver weed harvesting and pulling it all out. This is all trying to go back to step, reduce the temperature of the river, try and get the nutrients out, reduce all that so the weeds go away. You know, so
I think it would be nice to have on one map these different projects so that you could get a better picture of what the full extent of this is, because all these pieces add up to a solution, and bit by bit, it's kind of hard to appreciate. People think Karamoo Stream. I think a lot of people think basically about down toward the Clyde River, and that's about it. And it'd be helpful to see the whole.
So the bridge at Havelock North. That's it.
But I have to say to you, I had the same sort of thing on feedback I was getting on social media around people's not understanding the extent of the Ahuri estuary as well. I found that quite interesting. It's just the same thing.
Yep, it's a really good point. What we want to do, and interesting, Ahuri and Tūtera, a couple that we'd like to focus on, is develop an interactive place in our website where we can push people to, where you've got a map. You can click into it and say what's happening there and bring out the information.
Sure.
So
Great.
that's a work in progress.
Mr. Chair, just to add to that picture, and obviously we're building this, we're driving this thing along and continuing to build it, which is okay. I wonder whether we could look at some of the, if you like, the metrics that we're trying to influence, and Councillor Barker's issue around temperature. So how much drop in temperature are we wanting to see? You know, what setback of planting are we likely to have? What's the kilometres of planting? That's the sort of there's some inputs and then some outputs. What is the nutrient status? I don't know what monitoring we're doing in those particular tranches, but some measurables that we can say this is what we're looking at, and this is the progress we're making on that journey.
I can say that we're looking at planting 10,000 plants in the Karamoo, covering quite a wide area. I'm not sure exactly how many hectares, but also fencing 2 kilometres.
Sure. So are we anticipating that will have an impact on those outcomes, or
Sure.
we've got to move from
you want the outcomes. We'll describe the outcomes that we're aiming for.
And to me, that's that goal setting.
Yeah.
If you produce this document that talks about this stretch and we're distributing it to the neighbours, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there.
Yeah. And certainly as we move into the integrated catchments approach, that's what would be bringing back the metrics of how many kilometres and how many plants are really just activities towards the outcome. The outcome being, temperature reductions, dissolved oxygen increases, numbers of fish. Those are the sort of outcomes you're interested in.
3 or 4 measures that.
Yes. So I remember when we went into this hotspot stuff, having measurable outcomes and judging our progress was a key part of the discussion we had, I remember.
I'm ready to move the recommendation, Chair.
Are you basically?
That's us.
Are we through?
Yep. Paranak was the last one.
That's us.
You're moving.
I'm ready to move the recommendation.
I thought you already had.
Question.
Good.
Thank you, Chair. Just through you to the Chief Executive, this report's good, and I know we've been asking for it, but it would be useful to see a breakdown of what we've spent and what remains. Just a one-pager like we used to, or we still get with HBRIC, if you like. So the
that's fine.
hotspot, what we've spent, what remains,
Can you just
to help with what Councillor Bevan said about gauging our success rather
Easy.
Cool. Receiving the report has been moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bevan, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're now going to talk about the juicy subject of compliance, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
Euphemistically called resource use.
And abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome, Wayne. Go
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. This report that is a first for us. Will be the first of many, and it's to be followed by later on through first of all this committee, just some more kind of reports and attempts really to, I suppose, to be more transparent about I suppose what the compliance function is within the organisation, how it fits into to what the organisation itself is trying to achieve in terms of environmental outcomes, and also the hope to we'll get this type of thing on the website so people can be readily available to everybody, because it's not just the community that I think needs to learn of what we do and how we do it, and why we do it, but also the people within our own organisation probably need to know that too, because I think if there's been anything I suppose we could be criticised for over the last period of time is that we haven't really sold ourselves as to what we do, why we do it, and what we're achieving. And this report here today, I suppose, is a bit of a report card on the community and how that's how the community is performing, and more specifically industry, and also as a result of people seeing this, I suppose to a degree it's a bit of a naming and shaming in some respects, and so hopefully it will drive an improvement in behaviours. It'll also, coming from the other end too, it makes what me and my team are doing a more, again, to say more visible, and people can ask, well, here we've got this traffic light system, and so-and-so's, has been red for 3 years. Why? What are you doing about it? And we can either answer to everybody's satisfaction, or not answer to your satisfaction and go and do something about it. So you have it all there, and I'm quite happy to lead you through it or answer any questions anyone might have.
How do you want to do it, Mr. Chairman? How do you want to proceed? How do you want Wayne to proceed? Through it page by page, or just answer questions?
Question sounds good.
Yep.
And I have one. So on page 55, Wayne, talking about the dairy farms and the spread of effluent. So it says in a sentence here, however, pasture can only use so much effluent at a time. It is important to match the irrigation depth to the capacity of the pasture to utilise the nutrients. Now, it doesn't say there, but I assume that when you're monitoring what they're doing, you take into account recent rain events, because that's got a huge influence over the capacity of the pasture to absorb any more.
Yes, I'll tell you, the way we monitor that is essentially, well, it's through, it's two ways. One is through a physical visit of the farm. Of course, we'll do that once or twice a year, so it's only a snapshot. The other way we monitor it, of course, is by I suppose by exception if there's a complaint about ponding. But during the compliance visit, our compliance officer undertakes I suppose you could say, a test of the irrigation equipment, and it's a little bit kind of, I suppose, to me it's a little bit involved in, they set buckets up around the outside and measure how much they're collecting in bits and pieces. So there's no in-ground monitoring as such on these farms for us to be able to make that determination. So I suppose the long answer to your question is that we really only pick that up through either exception because there's been some event, some ponding, or number two, we'll pick it up when we make our physical visit.
Yeah, so it will be an absolute failure if there's 2 inches of rain today and a farmer goes and does this tomorrow.
Oh, exactly. They should.
It'll go straight through.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
So the question is, how do we know whether or not that's happening? And the answer, I think, is quite simple. Would be if we did the same thing we do with consents for irrigation, and we're getting signals about when it was being used, what times, you'd soon know if that's what was going on, and be able to do something about it.
So I don't quite understand what you're saying.
Look, Councillor, I assume you're referring to getting telemated data on effluent spreading, and then matching that with rainfall. Technically, I guess that's feasible. It's not something that's required in consent conditions at the moment. I think one of the things we probably need to give some consideration to is whether or not the current compliance and enforcement of those consent conditions is effective. So that's something which you may or may not want to consider looking into more deeply at some point in time, and it's something which could come through a freshwater plan change, such as the tank plan changes, are more stringent rules.
But given the light-handed way that we do compliance in this region, how would you know whether you're being effective or not? That's the problem. And if there are electronic ways that we can improve our monitoring so it's relatively resource less hungry, then why wouldn't we do it?
Look, it'll be a compliance cost question. Obviously, the telemetering of water take data has been a cost on the industry, which has been fairly considerable. It's probably been technically easier, particularly in the Heritonga zone, just because of cellular coverage. Once we're getting up into the back blocks of Pātauka and what have you, where you've got effluent spreading going on, you'll need to ensure that you've got a network to collect that in real time. The alternative is that it's logged and the data is collected on a semi-frequent basis, downloaded by somebody, farmer, and supplied. All paper records are provided, and of course they're always open to abuse as well.
I'm trying to come up with a system that is not going to be resource hungry at our end.
No, well, I guess so. Look, there's 80 dairy farms, and if you said, I think telemetry data on water takes is in the order of sort of $10,000 to $15,000 worth of kit. Per property,
no, it's half that.
Right. Okay. Well, then so you have to weigh up whether or not the frequency with which the rules are abused and the impact of that.
So did we do that when we made 2,000 people spend money on telemetry for irrigation consents?
Well, I think one of the benefits of telemetered irrigation consents for water allocation is that it enables the types of approaches such as the Twyford Irrigators Group, where you've got a global consent and you're able to optimise water use at any given time. Here we don't have quite that same imperative. Look, I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, it's just saying that there will be a considerable cost, and it may be only a very few number of farmers that are actually abusing the rules at the moment and are irrigating after rainfall.
Can I just say, I just think this conversation needs to be turned around. I'm getting, Peter saying, yes, we can, and you saying, we've got all these problems, why not? I just think there's a different discussion here. I think Peter's raised a really interesting thing. So what is now more possible by the advance of technology for us to do monitoring than we could do before? See, the mindset is still back in a paper-based system. What Peter's saying, we've got fibre cable being laid to all these places. They've got, internet connection, etc. That this is now possible. And in the past, we couldn't think about this. We can now, so why don't we think about it? Without prescribing what all the difficulties are, and I want to say, I think you've made a really good point.
Councillor, I said at the outset this is technically possible to do. The point I'm making is there's a cost-benefit equation in this. It hasn't been something we've evaluated, so we're not in a position to give you advice today. But
so
if you would like us to look into that,
let's finish the conversation.
Sure.
Okay.
Councillor Burley. Thank you, Chair. Through you to Wayne. Page 57. I quite like those little tables with the coloured coding in them. I think that's really useful. Irrigation water consents. I'm intrigued by the comment that there are always issues involving compliance with water take consents purely because of the volume of water takes and the variety of operators involved. Because given we all on that telemetry data or whatever it is, I wouldn't have thought there would have been much issue at all, either within your consent conditions or you're not.
Yeah, what I'm alluding to there is when telemetry first came on, there were a few little kind of hiccups with it, in so much that telemetry it's reporting all the time. And so what was happening with the exception reporting alerts that we were getting, of course they were showing that they were for better words, non-compliant or outside their consent. Usually the rate of take, like every 15 minutes. So we ended up having to chop and change how we actually read that, like smoothed it out. So we're only taking the gauge, every half a day or something for that kind of those kind of things. So those are the kind of issues that we kind of have while you'll have these little ups and downs, very small parts of the day or on the continuum. Those are the kind of things I was talking about. Overall, it's not that troublesome as you say, but it's just those little kind of teething problems.
I can follow your explanation, but if I was a member of the public and picked up this document and looked at that, I would get a completely different impression.
Sure.
It's just the way that it's worded. Yep.
Yeah, sure.
That wasn't really. page 61.
Actually, sorry, the page is a little bit different on the, sorry.
Oh, okay, right. Page 13, sorry.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. The council page?
Yeah, the council page. Actually, no, that wasn't so much finished because I'm fully aware that we're dealing with that stuff. What was the other one? Oh, sorry, page 17. You've got these are the pollution complaints that come in.
Yes.
We get a report every week which basically says these are resource consent applications that have been applied for.
Yep.
And yada yada, so we've got a good idea of what's going on. I know that I've had a number of people that have said to me they've made pollution complaints and they've received no response back from us for one reason or another. Now, if you get 10 complaints about the same thing, I can certainly understand that. What I would like to see, and if you could give this some consideration, is more regular reporting of what complaints have actually been received. And I think if we, you could, like I say, if they're a common sort of complaint about a particular issue, well then we can log them all together and it doesn't really matter too much. So you don't have to delve right down into great depth. But I just want the public to be assured that every complaint that we received has actually been actioned and something's been done with it, whether it's no action's been taken or an investigation's been undertaken or whatever's happened.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get two answers there for you. Number one, we can provide that because we provide that reporting internally anyway. For the public, we'd probably have to do some massaging that so we didn't have people's names. And
yeah, that's fine. Yep.
The second thing too, this is the second time you've mentioned, I think, about somebody ringing up and not being and not receiving the feedback from us, and I went back to check on that, and you were right because the new pollution response officer hadn't been doing that because we hadn't told them to. So sorting that out. So because my expectation is and the normal practice is that we actually get back to everybody, let them know what the outcome was. So.
Yep, no, that's cool. I'm pleased to see that that's in train. Page 20, hazardous sites.
Yes.
It's what sort of struck me in there is that, and I'm not too sure whether that's in the right place, but I always, whenever I hear hazardous sites, I always think Roy's Hill and the Onikoa landfills.
Yep.
And I don't see any mention of those anywhere. Whether it's necessary to have them in there or not, I'm not entirely sure. But like I say, every time I see hazardous sites, even if it's to say that I don't know, nothing's happened or nothing's noticeable's gone on or something.
Yes, I think I agree, and also I think too, in retrospect, that those municipal landfills and those sites should have been in the main body of the report too. In fact, the reason they weren't in there was because both of those consents were compliant, so I didn't actually put them in there. But I take your point that maybe that type of thing should be in the report, and there's probably other things too which you people might think, these are important enough, industries are visible enough that should be in the report, and that's the kind of feedback I'd like to see from you as well.
Yep. Yep. Even if it's to say that they are compliant, it's almost as if they perhaps had a traffic light all their own. Yes, we've got like handpack in there and some other other topics in there. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Wayne, for the report. A good report, but I am going to take you up on your invitation to add to it if you can. It occurred to me when I first start looking at the report under dairy, there's a couple of pages of commentary and some good data that gives me a picture of what the issues you face and what you've done about it. So we know how many dairies there are, we know who's compliant, etc. and some good tables around that. So using that as if you like the model, I wonder whether you could expand on that for not every consent that's going here, but for the main categories, but taking perhaps this other helicopter view of this to say, for example, going to your council discharges and understanding, how many consents there are, what's the data on those, and the other question I've got too, Wayne, is the connection that you may have with, for example, our science monitoring and what's actually happening. I'm assuming that your data here is a consequence of reporting, auditing, monitoring, etc. So it's an aggregate of responding to call-outs. But then the other side of that equation is, what is the water quality looking like at the point of discharge for, say, a major drainage systems in
I get you. Yes,
that area. So
there'd be more kind of catchment kind of reports, wouldn't they, and how this.
I don't know whether you've got any specific data to say the plantation drain drops into at Onikawa there, and we know from monitoring that the contaminant levels look like this. I'm not saying write all that down, but it's saying this is the state of that discharge from a, if you like, a physical measurable point of view, so that ultimately you're linking your work with the work of others and you're converging it into, yours is the hard end. This is where the rubber hits the road, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I like that, and I think it's something we could probably do in conjunction with some of the other teams too.
We can certainly feed in the SOE monitoring data into there and look at state and trends. I think we just need to be cautious that stalks don't necessarily bring babies. If we have a declining trend and it's associated with there's a discharge in proximity, it might not be the discharge, it might be whole of catchment issues. But we can point that out for Wayne to report.
But it's that sort of observation and analysis that gets to the answer. We're not saying it's this party discharging. We're saying we've actually got this problem, and it may be that one, but maybe another one.
There's a couple of other regional councils that that do this, that I've stolen this from, and they've been doing it for a while, and they do it very, very well. So I'll have a closer look at those, because I think that one of them in particular does make that link, like you talk about certain areas and certain industries and stuff.
I think the other thing that's worth noting too is that yesterday Wade and I and a couple of other staff met with some of our IT people who are developing, IRIS, which is the new resource management information system that you're funding, and to look at, because the IT people have started developing exactly this kind of dashboard, not necessarily traffic lights, in fact more colours than that, but around consents and around compliance. And we'll be able to have, once that's up and running, it'll be up and running for this compliance monitoring, not all of the functions of resource use, but the compliance part of it in April of 2018. So we'll be able to have up to date and data as much as the system can deal with. So I think we'll be able to, next year's annual report might look quite a bit different to this, or more comprehensive, and it'll be actually easier for us to get the information out, won't it, Wayne?
I want to get back to an issue I've raised before, which is about the frequency of these reports. My personal view is we should have a regular reporting from the compliance team, and regular as in every 3 months. We had a discussion about before, and it was inconclusive the last term. It was coming up annually. I always thought it was too little. I'd like to rerun the argument. I think to have it as an annual report is far too long. I think we should have, not monthly, but every 3 months would be to have a regular report. And then we can shuffle around to make it make sense. But I want the report not because I want to cross the line as a politician into the area of compliance, just about the information. I realise there's got to be a separation here, complete separation. So we've got to be clear about that line.
My question, Council, would be how much information you would like in that report and what form it would take, because the statistical information is actually provided through that OPAL reporting, which is of course hidden away, I suppose, by and large. So are you thinking something more along these, like say for example, if you were to look at perhaps that page, or those 2 pages on, for example, pollution response, something along those kind of lines on a 3 monthly basis, or something which will give you, I suppose, an idea of where we're tracking, what we're doing, and.
Well, unlike Councillor Bailey, I'm not interested in having a report to say that the landfill is meeting its compliance with thing. If it's meeting its thing, it's meeting its thing. I'll just take that as the base. What I am interested in is where there are issues of non-compliance, and I'm interested in the frequency of non-compliance, so we can get onto trends sooner rather than later.
Sure.
And if you report to us once a year, well, 12 months, 9 months can have gone, and things have moved on, and we just don't know about them. So, there might be that we need to make some decisions about things. So I just think a regular update from you about what's happening. If everything's going fine, that's fine. I don't need to know anything about that. And the other thing I'd say with your traffic lights, I've dealt with these in other parts of my life, and I find them in some ways frustrating. It's good to see them quickly, but to get a red mark can be a very minor thing. But when you see a whole block of red, it sends you a big signal. They're not very sensitive, actually. So useful tool, but limited. But what I'm interested in is the number of infringements, what's happening, have we got any trends emerging here, do we need to do something different so we can be fast movers rather than wait 12 months. That's my issue. So I expect you to massage the report to give us that information. You are to be our eyes on this, and you need to report to us regularly. That's my view.
Councillor Ross.
Just on page 9, AFCO, Whitehall, 5 issues there. They're either they've got moderate issues or significant non-compliance in the last 3 years. Where are we heading, considering that they're not looking that flash and they do discharge into the river?
Well, you see those, the colours, as you see, are explained on those 5 points.
I get that.
That's the offending, and I suppose the next step, based on their history, is there'll be a prosecution. But so the hope there, of course, is all these things that have been shared with them, and that they will make the required changes and keep themselves out of court.
So are you getting that feeling? Are you getting that flavour from them that they are going to make the required changes and keep themselves out of court?
Well, they keep saying they're going to, and the proof of the pudding's in the eating of whether they offend or not. So.
And I had another comment on Eastland, there we go, on page 10. Enforcement action was taken, but it wasn't completed. I don't know.
Yep.
Just thinking of someone reading this who actually agreed on a compensation deal. I'm not sure if that's worth putting in here or not.
Cool. I'm not sure whether that would be appropriate or not. I'm not sure. I'd have to take it.
Well, we didn't complete enforcement action.
We took enforcement action. It is factual, but I say it's not going on to explain what actually happened in the end. Yeah.
And obviously the last one, 13, Central Hawke's Bay. Where are we heading?
South.
The Mayor and the Chief Executive are coming to speak to the Council. It's looking like your Council meeting on the 13th of December now to give a presentation on where they are heading. It's a long-term plan solution, given that, as I think has been foreshadowed in the media, that they're back to the drawing board in terms of their technical solution. Given that the community needs to dispose of its waste, short of rejigging their system, there's not an awful lot that anybody can do right now, and us continuing to fine them or prosecute them isn't going to change any of those facts. So we're satisfied that they are doing everything they possibly can as quickly as they can, and have already embarked on an LTP conversation with their community over about $45 million worth of capital investment in their 3 waters. So I think they're doing everything they can. But speaking of people doing everything they can, look, I note that with respect to AFCO, there's been a range of non-compliances, and I think to date these have been addressed via infringement notices or fines. Obviously we have the discretion to move to prosecution, and one of the decision triggers of prosecution always is the compliance history of the company involved. I have no difficulty in public session noting the fact that there is a history of non-compliance, and this company continues to repeat that. Well, then they put us in a position where we have no choice but to prosecute.
Can I just respond to your contribution, which I think has been really useful? I think what we also need to have at some point is a discussion about the sort of philosophical underpinning of this. Are we here to simply fine people, or are we here to bring about behaviour change? And for my money, I prefer behaviour change is what we should be aiming for. But if there is consistent non-compliance, well, then we have to do something. And in regard to Central Hawke's Bay wastewater system, I've been on the edge of this for decades, and I was berated by a previous mayor about the regional council taking them to court and getting them fined for non-compliance. I'm aware this council's invested a lot of money in trying to help with other systems, and yet we still have the system. Still have the issue as we have it today. When is enough enough? And yes, you might raise about the long-term plans to do that, and people coming and talk to us, but they've made some very poor decisions, and the Tukituki River is the one that suffers for it. I just want to think we've got to have a pretty tough conversation about these things, so that we expect standards to be met and excuses just run out.
So, Councillor, their comprehensive review of their infrastructure was precipitated by the prosecution action that we took earlier this year, and so I think that's demonstrated the impact that a prosecution can make. In relation to your more general point, we have a review of our compliance function underway at present by an independent expert. She is due to provide us with a report by the end of this week, and that will be provided to councillors with an opportunity to discuss it with the independent advisor on, I think, the Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting on the 11th, yes, the Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting on the 11th of December, where we can have a good conversation about our entire approach to compliance going forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are you about to bring this to a close?
I was, yes, I'm very happy to, Mr Chair, and just about one point, if you just allow me, and it's following on from Councillor Barker's comment and this report. I just wondered whether we could look at the, if you like, sector by sector conversations that are being had. So aggregating up, so take for example the meat industry, what conversations have been had generally with the meat industry about their performance in the region, what conversations have been had at a higher level. I'm thinking perhaps, Liz, I think this is in your territory in terms of elevating the issues for a bigger conversation, particularly with local authorities, etc. I wonder whether we could capture that very important piece of work, and there's a lot of activity goes on there, but we don't seem to capture it. And I wonder whether this is the place to put it, as an additional page or 2 pages, sector by sector, saying we have really engaged with all the industry players in Onikawa about, and we've told them how bad their water is, you know, and we keep doing it. So I wonder whether you could think about a contribution into this reporting that looks like that.
Certainly, I was thinking when the suggestion was made by Councillor Barker about a regular update, that perhaps rather than just, you know, necessarily regurgitating the number of visits or whatever every quarter, that we actually could potentially, we could trial this anyway, focus on a particular type of consent or type of activity or a sector. And so, for example, you know, if there was an update March or April next year, we may well look at water use, but look at other industries as we go through the year on either a needs basis or just on a regular reporting basis as well, but and do a little bit more of a deep dive into each of those, but certainly report any exceptions, any conversations, any concerns that may have arisen in the previous quarter back to you from. Yep.
Happy to move, Mr.
Are you moving to receive it?
Seconded.
I have yet to comment. I think I'm delighted with this report. I think this is great. I have some comments like others have about ways to improve it, but I love the idea that Johnny Bostock or somebody will wake up one day and see a big red mark next to him in a public document that says, you know, oh, we caught you. And if it puts these guys under the gun and they have to step up and say, oh, but it was only a little thing, it's not like I'm AFCO, you know, then fine, let them bring the case forward that they want to make. So I recognize Rick's point that, you know, red and green is a little blunt, but for some purposes, I think it's perfect. And the fact that we have identified specific instances of enforcement actions and so forth in a report like this, I think is terrific. I felt like a number of people have said that there were some contextual framing of this that was missing, that you know, where have the most significant issues been, and does that draw us to, in a given report, focusing on a sector or some one or another aspect of this? That would be helpful. And the other thing I don't have a sense of out of this is what actually drives the expenditure of energy and resource that you put into this. This has the look of a very responsive type of approach. We get complaints, or we hear things, or we whatever, but I'm not quite sure if I look at this, does most of this go into navigational safety, or does it go into monitoring dairy farms? I mean, I don't know what the overall level of effort is, and how you're setting your priorities in that respect. So for me, I'd be interested in knowing a little more about that. But I would hope that Hawke's Bay Today picks this up, you know, and says, "Wow, look at all these red marks," and you know, has that in a few of these characters, and
Bay Bus.
You know. So
all the villains.
So I think the whole discussion we've had indicates the value of the report.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it has triggered a whole set of, I think, we all are a bit better informed about this, a whole range of ideas about how it could be even better, and hats off to you. Great.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
All those in favor of receiving the report?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I think we're down to just about the end.
Is Wayne going to hang around for this particular paper? I had a question, I think, which...
Are we on operational activities?
Yeah.
How did they call it?
We'll just take this one as read, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Because they are largely Graham Henson's.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I'd have a... Whilst Wayne's here. There was a compliance resource use, is feedlots. You went through and you gave us an update on the results of your flights and everything else like that. I'm a little bit confused about the numbers. That three were found, 23 previously unknown properties, 20 of these were found to be compliant with the regional rules. So they basically took a gamble that they felt that they were complying with the rules and didn't come to us and say previously?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Okay, and they were. The 3 were found to be non-compliant, resulting in one prosecution and 3 infringement fines. So they took the gamble and lost.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's great.
I think you'll also find there's another figure in there that those that we found, I think that who we then referred to get a resource consent to.
16.
Yeah.
16 years, so, yeah.
Hopefully that message is permeating amongst that community that we're serious about following up on these issues. So I've got to admit I was disappointed to see that there were 23 previously unknown. I thought that was a bit rich.
We've some of the feedback we've got from a couple of the people. One of the operations that got infringes that they're not going to do it next year. They've decided it's not worth it.
Yep.
Which is good. There are a couple of course, quite big players out there who are spending and are prepared to spend a lot of money to make it work.
Yep.
And some of the bigger ones that we visited earlier, who were consented, when we came back later on to look at them, you can see they've put a bit of work into it, and there's more work to be done. So I say those people that are serious about staying are prepared to put a lot of money into it, because there's a lot of money to be made from it if they do it right.
You know, that's why I got no issue with someone making $1 as long as they don't affect the downstream environment.
Thank you, Chair. Waipariki Beach Holiday Park is interested in the building assessment done by HDC. Then there's a priority list for repair, maintenance, and we have some urgent issues to address with builders, electricians and plumbers. So we went 300 each with the other 2 councils. Who's picking this bill up? And is that a very cute, we are the nominated managing authority? It seems ironic that both district councils have expertise in holiday parks and we have none.
Can someone just bring me up to speed on this?
Look, I'll have a go, Councillor, in Graham's absence. Look, there's a three-way split, if you like, between the councils over who's responsible for what, and it's a broadly equitable sharing of the pain, leveraging off the key capabilities. So, for example, so I was there last week actually with the entire organisation. So, one of the things I'm delighted to report is that we divided all of the council staff into 3 groups, and each had a day there last week, and we gave every staff member a spade, a paintbrush. Mrs Lambert had a paintbrush in hand.
Ladies' toilets, perfect.
I put up a retaining wall.
Saws and the like, and we had works group staff there as well. And so everybody did a morning's work, and then they had some time to do some bushwalking and things in the afternoon. We put on a barbecue at the end of the day. We probably got, I'm going to say, maybe 100 grand's worth of work done in 3 days, but through the goodwill of our staff. Great team building exercise, and we smartened the place up enormously. But while I was there, the leaseholder showed me their wastewater treatment plant, which has not had much work for some years and needs a jolly good clean-up. Now, the Hastings District Council, because essentially infrastructure in terms of waste and ourselves being the regulator, are responsible for cleaning that up. And so I had a conversation with their chief executive at the end of last week about them getting to it with respect to what they're doing. So, look, they're just...
And water supply.
Yeah, and of course the water supply. So Hastings is putting a pipeline this month from their existing reticulated supply across to deal with the issue. So look, we're working together as 3 councils, and I did say to the chief executives of the 2 other shareholder councils that they too might like to get their staff out there for some working bees, and we could avoid costs for all involved, do some team building and kind of work on this together. So went down very, very well with our own staff, great few days, and it was a win-win for everyone.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to comment on that and say, given that
Councillor Wilson still had the...
I was there. We had a discussion some time about staff being paid, people being paid the living wage. We've now set a new benchmark. We've got a paintbrush hand on the salary of Liz Lambert. This is the new benchmark. All rises to that.
I want to see the quality of the paintwork.
Still a brush hand rate.
I expect a Rembrandt out of that.
I just had actually unrelated, but the Te Tira Mai Ngā Iwi project. I just noticed when I came past this morning there was a range of fires burning up in the bush. Can someone tell me what the hell was going on there?
Saw them there yesterday.
Yeah.
Up in the bush.
Don't know, but we'll find out. Yeah, we saw them yesterday driving up to Wairau.
The logs being cut out of it too.
Yeah, no, it looked like it had been cleared. I just wondered, is that part of the project, or is that a private landowner doing some clearing or something?
When you start up in the bush over the other side of the lake,
on the other side of the lake,
there was some trees that were cleared and piled up.
Yeah. No, it wasn't one of the stacks. It was on the peninsula. There are wood stacks that ultimately will be burnt. Typically, they don't burn at this time of year, so we'll find out.
As long as everyone's aware of that.
Here we are.
Any other questions, comments? Peter?
I'll move. I'll second.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I think we're down to additional business items, which were...
Take the city conference.
Just quickly,
the city conference?
Yeah, just quickly. I did have a chat with Campbell at lunchtime. I'd be interested in, getting some of the material of what happened. I just make a point. It was a shame that it clashed with today, and I understand some councillors went yesterday and enjoyed it. I was hoping to get along, but we had the two-way meeting, which I'll talk about shortly. But I have asked and just advising everyone that the material will be available. I think there's a video, even if you were suffering insomnia, you could have a look in the middle of the night.
Peter.
Oh, that must be for me then.
There you go. And we'll get a report.
Dark of the night, he wants to read reports. Give him some more.
And the other thing, just very quickly, and the chair actually wasn't here when I put this up as a minor item. Council Chair, I'm talking about. The Tūhoe meeting went very well yesterday. I just want to make a couple of points that intersected with this committee on the basis that we did talk about some of the water science stuff and our ability to get alongside some of their experts We were just a bit concerned that Ian Maxwell might go and domicile himself up there for the fishing season, but I think we can get past that.
Hunting.
And also the pest control stuff. There is a plague of possums around the lake at the moment, as scientifically measured by our chief executive when he was on holiday there recently, and they were eating his tent and stuff. And we are going to have a conversation, be part of that conversation going forward. Very positive day, and yeah, look forward to the next interaction with Tūhoe. They seem to have their act together on a number of fronts. Kia ora.
And Zone Committee.
Zone 4, 3 or whatever it is of the local government, New Zealand. Went along to that a couple of weeks back. There were two things I thought might be of interest to everyone. One was that Fran Wild gave a presentation about remuneration for councillors and chairs and mayors. Apparently we're supposed to be getting some feedback or giving feedback on that. I'm not entirely sure where that is. Somewhere.
Coming back to the corporate and strategic meeting.
Okay, that's really cool. And the other one was Mr. Maxwell gave a presentation about the outcomes from the Havelock North, and I had a number of people who were attending who commented about how well presented it was, and they were especially impressed by the fact that Ian was prepared to stand up and admit a malcuppa and say that we ballsed up a few things, and that was really, really impressive. So thank you, Ian. That made my evening actually. So thank you.
Well, you're easily satisfied and made happy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Could I just ask a question? Did Fran Wild say that councillors and chairs and deputy chairs, etc., need a pay cut?
Only those whose Christian names start with A.
That'd be about right. Half of course for Fran.
The meeting is over.
So that's Rex and Rick.